The council chamber was silent. Every member of the High Council sat frozen in their seats, their pale blue skin flickering with the soft glow of fear. On the massive screen before them, cities burned. Ships exploded in the darkness of space. Millions of their people screamed without sound as the transmission cut to static. Another colony had fallen to the Dominion. Ambassador Eth closed her 4 eyes and tried to steady her breathing. She had watched this same scene play out dozens of times over the past 300 cycles. There were monsters from the deep void between galaxies. Their ships were not built but grown, massive creatures of bone and metal that consumed everything in their path. They did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They simply fed. They had tried everything. They had offered tribute, but they did not want gold or technology. They had tried to run, but they followed them across the stars like patient predators. They had even attempted to fight, but their elegant crystalline ships were designed for speed and beauty, not war. Against the biomechanical nightmares of the Dominion, they shattered like glass. Now they were trapped in their final corner of space. Behind them was empty void. Before them was death. High Chancellor rose from his seat at the center of the council table. He was old, older than anyone could remember, and his once bright skin had faded to a tired gray. When he spoke, his voice cracked with exhaustion. "We have discussed every option," he said. "We have debated for cycles while our people die. There is nothing left to try." Eth stood. She knew what she was about to suggest would sound like madness. But madness was all they had left. "There is one option we have not considered," she said. "The humans." The chamber erupted. Council members shouted over each other, their voices mixing into a storm of protest. Eth waited for them to quiet down before she continued. "I know what the stories say about them. I know they are considered dangerous, unpredictable, violent beyond reason. But those same stories also say something else. They say the humans have never lost a war. They say that when humans fight, they do not stop until their enemy is dust." An older council member named Is laughed bitterly. "You want to invite predators to save us from predators. The humans would probably eat us themselves." "Perhaps," Eth admitted. "Or perhaps they are not what the stories claim. We have never actually spoken to them. Everything we know comes from other species, species who feared them. Fear makes for poor witnesses." Chancellor raised a hand to silence the council. He looked at Eth for a long moment, his ancient eyes studying her face. "You truly believe they might help us?" "I believe we have nothing left to lose by asking." The vote was close. Nearly half the council refused to support the plan. But in the end, desperation won. Eth was given permission to send a single transmission toward the region of space the humans called home. She spent 3 days crafting the message. She included star charts showing the advance. She included recordings of the destruction, the death, the horror that her people faced. She included a simple plea, "Help us." Then she sent it into the void and waited. The council expected weeks of silence. Eth prepared herself for months. Interstellar politics was a slow game, full of calculation and careful negotiation. Even if the humans responded, they would surely want to discuss terms, analyze risks, and debate among themselves. 6 hours after she sent the message, a ship appeared at the edge of space. Eth was still in the communications center when the alert came through. She stared at the sensor data, unable to believe what she was seeing. A human vessel, small and unremarkable, had dropped out of faster-than-light travel and was broadcasting a peaceful greeting. She answered the hail with trembling hands. The face that appeared on her screen was strange to her eyes. The human had soft pink skin, no scales or glow, with dark hair cut short and eyes the color of deep water. He wore a uniform of navy blue with symbols she did not recognize on his chest. "Ambassador Eth," he asked. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "My name is Commander Cole. I'm here on behalf of Earth's United Defense Council." Eth tried to find her voice. "That was very fast, Commander. We did not expect anyone for some time." Cole smiled. It was an odd expression, the corners of his mouth turning upward, but somehow Eth did not find it threatening. It seemed almost kind. "Your message was received by our deep space monitoring network," he explained. "When we saw what you were facing, there wasn't much discussion. I was the closest ship, so they sent me ahead to make contact." "Ahead," Eth repeated. "Ahead of what?" "The fleet ambassador. They're already on their way. I'm just here to get the details and let you know we're coming." Eth felt her mind struggling to keep up. This was not how things worked. There were supposed to be negotiations, demands, careful weighing of costs and benefits. No species simply sent a fleet because someone asked for help. "Commander, I do not understand. What do you want in return? What are your terms?" Cole's smile faded slightly, replaced by something more serious. He leaned forward, and Eth saw something in his eyes that she had not expected. It was not hunger or calculation. It was anger, but not directed at her. It was anger at what she had shown him in her message. "You asked for help," he said simply. "That's enough. You don't bargain with people who are drowning. You throw them a rope." Eth felt something wet slide down her cheek. It took her a moment to realize she was crying, something she had not done since she was a child. "You do not even know us," she whispered. "Why would you risk your people for strangers?" Commander Cole was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was soft but firm, like iron wrapped in cloth. 300 years ago, before we ever left our planet, there was a great war on Earth. Millions of people died because those who could have helped chose to look away. We swore we would never make that mistake again. When someone calls for help, we answer. No exceptions." He straightened in his chair, and his expression shifted to something more businesslike. "Now, Ambassador, show me where these are. We have a lot of work to do, and my people are not known for their patience." For the first time in 300 cycles, Eth felt something bloom in her chest. It was small and fragile, like a flame in a storm, but it was real. Hope. The journey to human space took 4 days. Commander Cole's small ship led Eth's diplomatic vessel through regions of the galaxy she had only seen on old maps. Stars she did not recognize burned in the darkness. Planets with strange colors drifted past her windows. Everything felt alien and unknown. But nothing could have prepared her for what waited at the end of the journey. They emerged from faster-than-light travel near a massive planet with swirling bands of orange and brown. Cole had called it Jupiter, a gas giant with no solid surface. Eth barely noticed it. Her attention was fixed on what floated in the space around it. Ships, thousand upon thousand of ships. They hung in the void like sleeping giants, their metal hulls reflecting the distant light of the human sun. Some were sleek and modern, their surfaces smooth and covered with weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Others were older, their armor patched from countless battles. A few looked ancient, their designs primitive compared to the others, yet somehow they seemed the most dangerous of all. Eth pressed her hand against the window of her ship, unable to speak. She had seen fleets before. They had once commanded hundreds of vessels, but this was something different. This was not a fleet. This was a force of nature. "Welcome to Jupiter Station," Cole said through the communication channel, "home of the Iron Armada." The name sent a shiver down Eth's spine. She had heard whispers of this fleet in the darkest corners of galactic space. Traders spoke of it in hushed voices. Pirates fled entire sectors at rumors of its approach. But she had always believed it was a myth, a story humans told to frighten their enemies. It was real, all of it was real. Cole guided her ship toward the largest vessel in the formation. It was a massive warship, easily 10 times the size of any craft, with a hull of dark gray metal and weapons that jutted from its surface like the spines of some deep-sea creature. The name painted on its side read USS Sentinel. Eth was met at the docking bay by a group of human officers in crisp uniforms. They led her through corridors of steel and glass, past crew members who nodded respectfully as she passed. Everything was clean and organized, but there was a tension in the air. These people were preparing for war. The command center of the Sentinel was a massive room filled with screens and holographic displays. Officers sat at dozens of stations, monitoring data that Eth could not begin to understand. At the center of it all stood a small woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight knot. Her uniform was the same navy blue as the others, but the symbols on her shoulders were different, more important. Ambassador Eth, the woman said, extending her hand in what Eth had learned was a human greeting. I'm Admiral Grace Harmon, commander of the Iron Armada. Welcome aboard. Eth took the offered hand carefully. The Admiral's grip was firm and warm. Thank you for receiving me, Eth said, and thank you for coming to our aid. I still do not fully understand why you would help us. Admiral Harmon smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. She turned to the main display and activated a recording. The image showed a planet covered in green forests and blue oceans. It was beautiful, peaceful, full of life. This was the collective, Harmon said. 40 years ago, they found them. They sent out a distress call, begging anyone who could hear to come and save them. The image changed. The green planet was now brown and dead. Its oceans had boiled away. Its forests were ash. Nothing lived on its surface. We heard that call, Harmon continued. We were young then, barely capable of traveling between stars. We wanted to help, but we were too weak, too slow. By the time we could have reached them, they were gone, every single one of them. The Admiral turned to face Eth directly. Her eyes were hard with old pain and fresh determination. We made a promise that day. Never again. We would build a fleet so powerful that no one would ever have to face the darkness alone. We would answer every call, no matter how far, no matter how dangerous. She gestured at the ships visible through the command center's windows. This is the result. 4 decades of building, training, and preparing. Every ship you see out there carries the name of a battle we fought and won. Every crew member knows the story of and what we lost by being too weak to save them. A tall man stepped forward from among the officers. He wore the uniform of a ship captain, and a thick scar ran from his temple to his jaw. His eyes were cold and focused. Captain Shaw, he introduced himself. I command the heavy cruiser Ironclad. My ship has been in service for 30 years. She's been hit by plasma fire, asteroid fragments, and once a boarding party that made it onto the hull. She's still flying. Another officer joined him, a woman with short black hair and the posture of someone who had spent her life giving orders. Captain Maria Santos of the Defiance. My crew and I have been waiting for this fight since we first heard what to do to the species they conquer. We're ready. More captains stepped forward, each introducing themselves and their ships. Eth listened in growing amazement. These were not politicians or diplomats. These were warriors, hardened by experience and united by purpose. Admiral Harmon activated another display. This one showed a tactical map of the region where they had gathered. Our scouts have located their main force, she explained. Over 10,000 ships, massing in a nebula your people call the Crimson Veil. They're preparing for a final push into your home systems. Eth felt her heart sink. 10,000 ships. Even with the massive fleet around her, those numbers seemed impossible to overcome. Harmon saw the fear in her eyes and shook her head. Don't count us out yet, Ambassador. We've studied them for 40 years. We know how they think, how they fight, and most importantly, how they can be beaten. They rely on their hive mind to coordinate their attacks. Cut off the head and the body falls apart. She pointed to a massive shape at the center of the enemy formation. That's their flagship, the Endless Hunger. It's the brain of their entire fleet. We destroy that and the rest will scatter. Captain Santos grinned, a fierce expression that showed her teeth. One target, 10,000 bodyguards. Those are odds I can work with. Eth looked around the room at the faces of the human commanders. She saw no fear, no hesitation, only grim determination and something that almost looked like excitement. "You truly believe you can win this?" she asked. Admiral Harmon met her gaze without flinching. "We don't believe, Ambassador, we know, because losing is not something we're willing to accept." She turned to her officers and raised her voice so everyone in the command center could hear. "Signal all ships. The Iron Armada moves at dawn. We have a galaxy to save." The room erupted into organized chaos as officers rushed to their stations and began issuing orders. Eth watched it all with wonder. She had come seeking help from strangers. She had found something far more valuable. She had found an army of legends. The Crimson Veil was a cloud of cosmic dust that stretched across 3 star systems. It glowed with a deep red light, fed by the dying embers of ancient stars. For centuries, they had avoided this place, believing it to be cursed. Now it was filled with monsters. Eth watched from the observation deck of the Sentinel as the human fleet took up position along the edge of the nebula. 2,000 warships arranged themselves in precise formations, their weapons powered and ready. Smaller fighter craft swarmed around them like angry insects. The entire force moved with a coordination that seemed almost impossible for so many vessels. Admiral Harmon stood at the center of the command deck, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of every ship in the fleet. Her face was calm, but her eyes moved constantly, taking in information and making calculations that Eth could not follow. "The scouts are entering the outer edge of the nebula," one of the officers reported. "They'll be in weapon range in 15 minutes. Harmon nodded. "All ships hold position. Let them come to us. I want them thinking we're scared." The minutes passed slowly. Eth could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She had never been in a battle before. They were not warriors. They did not know how to fight. All she could do was watch and hope. The first ships emerged from the red clouds like nightmares given form. They were living things, their hulls made of dark chitin and pulsing organic material. Weapons that looked like claws and teeth jutted from their surfaces. They did not fly so much as swim through space, their bodies twisting and writhing with horrible grace. There were dozens of them, then hundreds, then thousands. The tactical display showed the enemy numbers climbing higher and higher. 5,000, 7,000, 10,000. The entire invasion force was pouring out of the nebula, drawn by the presence of the human fleet. Eth felt despair wash over her. There were too many. No force in the galaxy could stand against such numbers. But Admiral Harmon was smiling. "They took the bait," she said quietly. "All ships execute Battle Plan Alpha. Show them what humanity can do." The human fleet exploded into motion. Ships that had been holding still suddenly accelerated with terrifying speed, their engines burning bright against the darkness. Missiles launched in waves so thick they looked like glowing rivers pouring toward the enemy. Energy weapons flashed, cutting through the void with deadly precision. The first wave of scouts died before they could even react. Their bioships burst apart, spilling organic material into space. The survivors tried to regroup, but the humans did not give them time. Captain Maria Santos led the vanguard, her ship the Defiance cutting through enemy formations like a blade through water. Eth watched in amazement as the old warship twisted and turned, avoiding attacks that should have destroyed it while delivering punishing blows to everything in its path. 3 dreadnoughts closing on the Defiance, an officer warned. She's surrounded. On the display, Eth saw the massive warships converging on Santos' position. Each dreadnought was 10 times the size of the Defiance. Together, they would crush her. But Santos did not retreat. Instead, she ordered her ship forward, directly at the center dreadnought. "She's going to ram it," someone whispered in disbelief. The Defiance struck the dreadnought at full speed, her reinforced bow tearing through the creature's outer membrane like a knife through flesh. For a horrible moment, the two ships were joined together, locked in a deadly embrace. Then Santos fired every torpedo she had. The explosion tore the dreadnought apart from the inside. Chunks of organic matter and metal flew in all directions, slamming into the other two dreadnoughts and sending them spinning out of control. The Defiance emerged from the destruction trailing smoke and fire, her hull torn and battered, but still flying. "The Defiance is reporting heavy damage," an officer said, "but Captain Santos says she can still fight." Admiral Harmon laughed, a short bark of pride and admiration. "Of course she can. That woman doesn't know how to quit." Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships fought with a ferocity that they had never encountered. When their weapons ran empty, they used their ships as battering rams. When their engines failed, they set traps that destroyed enemies trying to finish them off. They refused to die, and they refused to surrender. Lieutenant Commander Amy Park commanded the fighter wings from the carrier Horizon's Edge. Over 600 small craft under her direction swarmed through the battle, targeting the connections between ships. The enemy relied on their hive mind to coordinate attacks, sending signals between vessels through organic cables. Park's pilots cut those cables wherever they found them, leaving entire sections of the enemy fleet confused and directionless. "Their coordination is breaking down," Park reported. "They're starting to attack each other by mistake." But the battle was far from won. For every ship destroyed, two more took its place. The human fleet was inflicting incredible damage, but they were taking losses as well. Eth watched as ship after ship winked out on the tactical display, their crews dying in the cold darkness of space. Then the endless hunger appeared. The flagship was unlike anything Eth had ever seen. It was massive, larger than a small moon, its body covered in weapons and eyes and mouths that seemed to look in every direction at once. It moved through the battle like a god among insects, ignoring the attacks that struck its armored hide. Wherever it went, human ships died. Its weapons were not beams or missiles, but something far worse. They reached out with invisible hands and tore vessels apart, crushing metal and flesh with equal ease. A destroyer tried to flee and was pulled backward into the flagship's waiting jaws. A cruiser launched every missile it had, only to see them swatted aside like flies. The human fleet began to fall back, regrouping around the Sentinel. "We can't beat that thing with conventional weapons," Captain Shaw growled. "It's too big, too strong." Admiral Harmon's expression did not change. She had known this moment would come. She had planned for it. "Signal the Valor," she said quietly. "Tell Captain Torres it's time." Eth saw something change on the tactical display. A single ship was moving away from the main fleet, heading directly toward the endless hunger. It was small compared to the flagship, old and battered, its hull patched with metal from different eras. "What is that ship?" Eth asked. Commander Cole appeared beside her, his face grim but proud. "That's the USS Valor," he said. "She's the oldest ship in our fleet. She's been decommissioned twice, but her crews always brought her back. She's never lost a battle in 200 years." Eth stared at the tiny ship, approaching the massive monster. "One ship against that thing, it's suicide." Cole shook his head slowly. "No, it's what we were born to do." Captain Benjamin Torres stood on the bridge of the USS Valor and watched the monster grow larger in his. The endless hunger filled the entire display now, its massive form blocking out the stars behind it. Eyes the size of buildings tracked his approach. Mouths lined with teeth of metal and bone opened in silent hunger. He was not afraid. Torres was 63 years old, and he had spent 40 of those years serving aboard the Valor. He had been a young ensign when he first walked her corridors, fresh from the academy and full of dreams. He had risen through the ranks, serving under 3 different captains, learning every system and secret the old ship held. When the previous captain retired, Torres had taken command, and he had sworn that he would never let the Valor die. Now he would keep that promise in the only way left to him. "All hands, this is the captain," he said into the ship-wide communication system. His voice was steady and calm. "You all know why we're here. You all volunteered for this mission knowing what it would cost. I want you to know that I have never been more proud to serve alongside any crew in my entire career." He paused, looking around his bridge at the faces of his officers. Lieutenant Jenny at navigation, who had refused 3 promotions to other ships because she loved the Valor too much to leave. Chief Engineer Bell, who had personally rebuilt the engines twice when the fleet tried to decommission them. Weapons Officer Diana, whose grandmother had served on this same ship 50 years ago. They looked back at him without fear. They had all made their peace. "The endless hunger is the brain of the fleet," Tors continued. "As long as it lives, they will keep fighting. As long as they keep fighting, innocent people will die. So we're going to kill it, and we're going to save everyone it would have destroyed." He allowed himself a small smile. Not a bad way to spend an afternoon. The crew laughed, and some of them wiped tears from their eyes. Tors felt his own eyes growing wet, but he did not let his voice waver. "All stations report ready. Let's show this thing what the Valor can do." The old ship surged forward, her engines burning brighter than they had in decades. Tors had ordered Bell to remove every safety limit, every governor that kept the reactors from overloading. The Valor was running on borrowed time now, her power output far beyond anything her designers had intended. She would burn herself out within hours. But she only needed minutes. The endless hunger noticed the approaching ship and reached out with its invisible weapons. Tors felt the hull shudder as terrible forces tried to crush the Valor like an egg. He watched the damage reports flash across his screen. Hull breaches on 3 decks, atmosphere venting from the port side, casualties in engineering. But the Valor kept flying. "Evasive pattern Omega," Tors ordered. "Diana, target their sensory clusters. Blind the beast." His hands danced across her console as she threw the ship into a series of impossible maneuvers. The Valor twisted and spun, moving like a ship half her age, dodging attacks that should have destroyed her. Fired every weapon they had, focusing on the massive eyes that covered the flagship's surface. One by one, the eyes burst and went dark. The endless hunger screamed. Eth heard it even aboard the Sentinel, a psychic howl of pain and rage that made every person in both fleets clutch their heads. The monster thrashed in space, its movements becoming wild and uncoordinated as its vision failed. But it was far from beaten. Tentacles made of bone and metal lashed out, trying to grab the tiny ship that was tormenting it. The Valor dodged some of them, but others struck home, tearing gashes in her hull and ripping away pieces of her armor. "Shields are gone," Bell reported from engineering. "Weapons are at 40%. Captain, we're falling apart." Tors nodded. He had expected this. The Valor could not beat the endless hunger in a fair fight. He had never planned to fight fair. "Overload the forward reactor. I want every bit of power we have in the main cannon." There was a pause on the communication channel. Everyone knew what that order meant. Overloading the reactor would give them one shot, one devastating blast that would drain everything the ship had. After that, the Valor would be dead in space, unable to move or fight. "Understood, Captain," Bell said quietly. "It's been an honor." "The honor was mine, old friend." The Valor's main cannon began to glow with building energy. It was an old weapon, designed in an age when humans still fought each other with ships of wood and steel. It had been upgraded dozens of times over the centuries, but its core remained the same, a simple tube that threw destruction at the enemy with brutal efficiency. Tors aimed for the endless hunger's primary brain cluster. It was located deep inside the creature's body, protected by layers of armor and organic tissue. A normal shot would never reach it. This would not be a normal shot. "All hands brace for impact," Tors announced. "It's been a privilege serving with you all." He fired. The beam that erupted from the Valor's cannon was brighter than a star. It burned across the void and struck the endless hunger directly in its center mass. The monster's armor held for 1 second, then two. Then it shattered, and the beam tore into the flesh beneath. The endless hunger tried to pull away, but it was too late. The energy drilled deeper and deeper, burning through organ after organ until it reached the brain. The explosion that followed was visible from 3 star systems away. The flagship came apart in a burst of light and fire, its body torn to pieces by forces beyond imagination. Chunks of flesh and metal flew in every direction, smashing into nearby ships and destroying them as well. And in the center of it all, caught in the blast she had created, the Valor died. Eth watched from the Sentinel as the old ship vanished in the light. One moment she was there, wounded but proud, still fighting. The next she was gone, nothing left but expanding debris and fatting energy. Tears streamed down Eth's face. She had known this crew for only days, but she understood what they had sacrificed. Around her, the bridge of the Sentinel was silent. Officers who had known some of the Valor's crew bowed their heads. Admiral Harmon stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the spot where the old ship had been. But there was no time for grief. The battle was not over. Without the endless hunger to guide them, the remaining ships fell into chaos. They attacked randomly, sometimes hitting their own allies. Their coordination was shattered, their hive mind broken. The human fleet moved in for the kill. It took 12 more hours to finish the battle. By the end, fewer than 300 ships remained, fleeing into the void with no direction or purpose. The invasion was broken. The war was won. But the cost had been terrible. 47 human ships destroyed, over 8,000 dead. Admiral Harmon ordered the fleet to gather the bodies they could find and record the names of those they could not. She read every name aloud herself, standing on the bridge of the Sentinel as her voice carried across all channels. The last name she spoke was Tor's. When she finished, she finally allowed herself to cry. 1 year had passed since the Battle of the Crimson Veil. Eth stood at the window of her quarters and watched the sun rise over mountains she had thought she would never see again. The light painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, and for a long moment she simply stood there, breathing in the beauty of a world that had been saved. The Dominion was finished. Without the endless hunger to guide them, the scattered swarms had become easy prey. Human hunting packs tracked them across the galaxy, destroying nest after nest until nothing remained. The threat that had terrorized 100 species for thousands of years was finally gone. Eth had been promoted to Chief Ambassador of the people. It was her job now to build the future, to create relationships with species she had never met and forge alliances that would last for generations. It was difficult work, but she approached it with a determination that surprised even herself. She had learned something from the humans. She had learned that hope was not weakness, it was strength. A soft chime announced a visitor at her door. She turned to find Commander Cole standing in the hallway, wearing his dress uniform and a slightly nervous expression. "Ambassador," he said formally, "the ceremony is about to begin." Eth smiled. Despite everything that had happened, Cole still treated her with the same respect and kindness he had shown from the very beginning. She had come to consider him a true friend, one of the few she had made among the humans. "I am ready," she said. "Lead the way." They walked together through the winding streets of the capital city. Everywhere Eth looked, she saw signs of recovery and renewal. Buildings that had been abandoned in fear were now full of life. Children played in parks that had been empty for generations. The despair that had hung over her people like a cloud was finally lifting. And everywhere she saw humans. They had come in the thousands over the past year, not as conquerors but as friends. Engineers helped rebuild damaged infrastructure. Teachers shared knowledge with scholars. Doctors worked alongside local healers to cure diseases that had plagued the population for centuries. It was not an invasion. It was a partnership. The ceremony was being held in the Grand Plaza at the heart of the city. By the time Eth and Cole arrived, the plaza was packed with beings from dozens of species. Stood beside humans, who stood beside the tall insect-like survivors, who stood beside the crystalline traders, who stood beside countless others. At the center of the plaza, a massive monument had been erected. It was made of metal salvaged from the wreckage of the Valor, shaped into a sculpture of the old ship rising toward the stars. Beneath it, 8,000 names were carved in stone, each one representing a human who had given their life in the battle. Admiral Grace Harmon stood before the monument, her gray hair shining in the sunlight. She looked older than she had a year ago, worn down by grief and exhaustion, but her eyes still held the same fierce determination that Eth had seen on the day they first met. "We are here to remember," Harmon began, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. "We are here to honor those who gave everything so that others might live. They did not fight for glory or wealth. They fought because someone needed help, and they refused to look away." She paused, looking at the names carved in stone. Captain Benjamin Torres, Lieutenant Jenny, Chief Engineer Bell, Weapons Officer Diana, and all the others who served aboard the Valor and the ships that fell alongside her. These names will not be forgotten. Their sacrifice will not be in vain. Eth felt tears running down her face, but she did not try to hide them. Around her, humans and aliens alike wept openly. The grief was shared, the loss felt by all. When Harmon finished speaking, the High Chancellor stepped forward. He carried a small crystal in his hands, glowing with soft blue light. "On behalf of the people," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "I present this gift to the people of Earth. It is a record of our history, our knowledge, our culture. Everything we are preserved forever. We give it freely as you gave your lives freely. We are forever in your debt." Admiral Harmon accepted the crystal with both hands and bowed her head in respect. "We did not come for payment," she said softly, "but we accept your gift in the spirit it was given. From this day forward, let our peoples be joined not as debtor and savior, but as equals, as family." The crowd erupted in cheers. Beings who had been strangers embraced each other. Species that had never spoken now exchanged words of friendship and hope. Something new was being born in that plaza, something that would change the galaxy forever. After the ceremony, Eth found herself standing alone at the base of the monument. She reached out and touched the cold metal, feeling the texture of the salvaged hull beneath her fingers. "Thank you," she whispered. "I wish I could have known you better." A voice spoke from behind her. "They would have liked you." Eth turned to find a young human woman standing nearby. She wore the uniform of a starship captain, and her face bore an expression of quiet pride and deep responsibility. "Captain Kate," the woman introduced herself, "commander of the USS Valor II." Eth's eyes widened. They built a new Valor. Nodded, constructed from pieces of the original. Every crew member volunteered, knowing the name they would carry and the legacy they would inherit. She smiled. "We launched yesterday. I was told to come here before our first mission to pay respects." She looked up at the monument, her eyes tracing the names carved in stone. "Captain Torres was my mentor," she said quietly. "He taught me everything I know about command. When I was young and scared, he told me that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the decision that something else was more important." Eth nodded slowly. He was a wise man. "He was the best of us," straightened her uniform and met Eth's eyes. "And now it's our turn to carry the torch. The Valor II is heading out to the rim, where a colony of refugees is calling for protection. We don't know exactly what threatens them, but we know they need help. And you will answer." It was not a question. Eth already knew what the answer would be. Smiled, a fierce and joyful expression that reminded Eth of Captain Santos charging into battle. "Always," she said. "That's what the Iron Armada does. That's what humans do. Wherever there's need, wherever there's fear, we answer the call, not because we have to, but because we choose to. She extended her hand, and Eth took it. "Stay safe out there," the ambassador said, "and know that you carry our hopes with you." Squeezed her hand firmly. "We'll make you proud." She turned and walked away, heading toward the shuttle that would carry her back to her ship. Eth watched her go, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and hope. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, more names carved in stone. But there would also be more moments like this one, more friendships forged across the stars, more proof that compassion was stronger than cruelty. The humans had shown the galaxy what was possible when you refused to abandon those in need. They had proven that legends were not just stories from the past but living things, carried forward by each new generation. And as the Valor II rose into the sky, her engines burning bright against the endless dark, Eth understood something that would stay with her for the rest of her life. Legends never die. They just find new heroes to carry them forward.